Hey guys, if you've already watched part one, that means you're here and you're still with us. That means you're smarter than most people. As we continue to go through this data on the 2020 and the 2024 election, specifically the 2024 election, you've heard about the Russian tail, you've heard about the anomalies in the voting, and we'll watch this part where all of a sudden, for some reason, votes for Trump start showing up at 50%. 50% of the vote is in, and all of a sudden everything starts shooting up. Watch it. It's crazy. And it'll wake you up to the fact that something happened. All right, we're back. And now let's continue the possible nightmare. Go ahead.
Potential nightmare.
Potential
nightmare. All right, let's talk a little bit about data analysis. So we started with Clark County, Nevada, right?
Right.
Now, we're just going to talk about mostly Pennsylvania here. I do have another PowerPoint for Clark County. That one's probably just going to be absolutely. You're going to need some psychology after that one, like a psychiatrist. So we're going to keep it simple with Pennsylvania.
So utilizing statistical analysis of vote count and turnout to the amount of votes a candidate gets.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're going to look at vote count, which is how many votes are cast per machine or county or precinct.
Total votes, both sides.
Sure.
Go ahead.
And then we're going to look at turnout, which is how many people are registered to vote, how many people showed up to vote. And we're going to look at them by precinct because Pennsylvania, each of the counties.
Is it weird?
You'll see. It's by precinct. So it's normal. Voting by precinct is normal. Okay.
All right.
Generally speaking, it's done throughout the U.S.
Are the registered and the vote?
Yeah. So you're going to compare.
All right.
And so each county has X amount of precincts. Some of them have more, some of them have less.
Got it.
So the way we do this analysis is we get the data for the county. Get the data for the county. And then we break it down by precinct. And then we're going to graph it and we'll show.
Okay.
So the first one we're going to do is, this is a vote count analysis. So briefly, let me explain what you're looking at here.
This was the graph that made my brain hurt.
Well, on the top, this one's hopefully going to be super simple because this is going to be our baseline.
Okay.
This is going to be, if you take nothing else from this, this is what we are arguing is more normal. And so the way you read this, we're going to look at the top graph. This is the 24 election.
Okay.
This is for mail-in voting. This is by precinct. And this is San Mateo County, California. And
Hometown.
Near
home, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm a Bay Area boy.
All right. So the way you read this is on the bottom axis, the x-axis. It starts at 0 and goes to the right. These are votes cast per precinct. Okay. So you got some precincts where you only have like less than 100 votes.
Right.
Those are the beginning. And then as you grow in the amount of votes that were cast per precinct, we see it's a straight line for both candidates. We don't see there's a lot of variance, but it averages out to more of a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so you've got some precincts where there's 2,500 plus voters. You've got some precincts that are, only 5, 10, 15, 20. And so this is normal. We're not seeing anything here that is of concern.
Mail-in precincts about the same, just kind of normal. Like some of the smaller counties have a lot more. I get it. Okay.
Yep. And so people will argue, hey, you're going to see certain things at smaller sizes. That's not generally correct. When you look at statistics, you're going to argue what is an appropriate sampling size? Because we're using precincts, after only a couple hundred votes per precinct, it becomes a consistent pattern.
Right.
You'll see it kind of at the beginning where you see it's a little thicker, sub 100 votes, right?
Yep.
But then it immediately becomes more of just a straight line.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're not just looking at like one precinct with 100 votes, we're looking at hundreds of precincts with 100 votes.
Got it.
See, so it averages out. So the only other point I'm going to make here is people will say, does this change based on a candidate being more popular or less popular? No. What'll happen is you see, in this case, Harris is blue, Trump is red. All you'll see is that it'll shift up and down the graph. Mm-hmm. So you see, in this case, mail-in, Harris is sitting somewhere around 80, a little less than 80%. So let's say it flips and Trump is really popular in mail-in. He's just going to sit on the 80% line. His shape of votes of the precincts aren't going to change.
Right.
It doesn't change as more people cast their votes.
Got it.
We understand that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kinda.
Kinda. Any questions here?
I mean, yeah.
I wouldn't want to be tested on it, but yeah, I kind of understand it.
But as long as we
We're
understand,
going to be tested, are we?
yeah, you're gonna have a lot of questions. I'm
Does it
sure.
make you panic?
Yeah.
But
So you're basically just showing so if you look at the bottom of the graph, 0 to 200, that's how many people voted in that precinct. And that polling place is basically what we're saying. And then it goes to, then there's other polling places that had 1,500 votes and you can see where they voted.
Yeah, how much of the votes they got.
Okay, go ahead.
All you're looking at is how many votes did each candidate get per precinct. And so you're like at 2,500, Harris was getting 80% of the votes that were cast in that precinct. So
Got it.
there you go.
All right, go ahead.
The reason why we're going to say is this is the baseline. This is normal.
Mhm.
If we can expect that. So if this is the baseline and we don't see any changes to the shape of the votes as more people voted across these precincts, we're going to look at some other places. I think we have one more baseline. Oh yes. And this is same location, same election, but this is election day. This is important because it's the same thing. You see,
So-
even though both candidates were closer to 50%, it's still the same shape. It's,
Yeah.
you've got more of a straight line consistency.
And you're saying that this is 2024. So San Mateo, you're saying you're believing that if there was no anomalies in San Mateo, it pretty much looked like a normal election.
Right.
Okay.
So if this is what a normal election looks like, we're going to look at Pennsylvania.
We can do shapes. We're good
Yeah.
at
This
shapes.
is
we're good at
geometry.
Shades of color, red and blue,
No, no,
and
no.
shapes.
We're not good at geometry.
That's a circle.
Shape.
But what's a triangle? How many sides?
3.
Boom.
See, come on,
See?
All right,
Mark.
you're going to pass this test.
All right, go ahead.
All right. So now we're going to, all right, hold on. Now we're going to look at another place.
See, he's getting scared. You scared him.
All right. All right. The last baseline. All right. And then we're going to
Okay.
actually get into the
Oh,
manipulation.
Erie. Okay.
This is Erie County, Pennsylvania. I think this is top 5
Mhm.
density county in the
Mhm.
state. It's either the 3rd or the 5th largest county. And similar pattern. They don't have as many precincts here.
Mhm.
So the shape isn't as well defined. But you notice,
Yeah, but
generally
you
speaking,
can still see it. Yeah, yeah.
roughly a
Yeah,
straight line.
yeah.
Generally speaking, this is roughly a straight line.
It is
Right.
not a rhomboid.
Yeah.
Hmm?
No. All right. So we're going to look at election day. And here we go.
Oh.
What?
So same application. This is Erie County. This is election day.
Wait, stop.
Hold on.
Wait,
Wait a minute.
That's not a straight line.
wait, but not only that, but okay, go ahead. You explain it before
Yeah.
you get talking.
No,
Go.
so if we look at both candidates separate, because it gets a little confusing when you look at both of them, we see at lower votes cast per precinct, Harris
He's killing it.
Harris is killing it, 80, 60% or so. And then as more votes were cast in these precincts, in precincts where more votes were cast, there's no time here. Everyone seems to get a little confused saying there's a time component. There's not. We're just showing you every precinct
Oh.
where a certain amount of votes were cast or
All day.
more.
all
Hold
day.
on.
This is all the counties.
If you
Or
look
sorry,
at
this is all the
them
precincts in Erie County.
separately, it actually looks
drop that.
somewhat normal until you hit 500. And around 500, well, actually maybe a little less than
Yeah, a
500,
little less than 500.
Trump goes up
About halfway.
drastically and Harris goes down.
Ray, look, it's more like 250. If you look at the blue, at 250, everything starts to drop,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
at
yeah.
250, everything
So
starts to go up.
what
we're
Holy
seeing-
shit.
To sum this up, we're seeing that at precincts where more votes were cast, the Republican Party grew in the amount of votes they were getting consistently all across the county.
Which would make you think that maybe if this were fraud, that there was a number that triggered
If this was caused by a compromise of the tabulation
a
machines,
Potentially.
a potential compromise,
alleged hypothetical.
Thank you.
then this would support a threshold
Got it.
of votes cast, and then you begin to manipulate the votes from one candidate to the
Which
other.
would make it
if
seem
you
less
look-
human and more
You can actually see how
maybe something to do with programming or
And the
Yes,
concern
yes.
here,
Question. So in order to
Is Ken here?
Hi everyone, I'm back here. I can barely see anything because anyway, with the tabulation and with code, you have to enter in a number in order for it to trigger something like this. In order for code to take off, or is there another way to write it where you could kind of make it gradual? Do you know what I'm saying?
yes. And so that's the argument of what is the algorithm? What are we seeing? And the concern
Stay
here,
on camera. Don't look at Ken. Stay on
the
camera.
concern here is we've tried to avoid talking too much about how exactly you would write this and do this with the machines, because the data tells us the concern. And the concern is it looks like you would set a threshold, and then depending on how you do it, after that threshold is met, which seems to be almost always more than the amount of votes you would audit in a precinct or a county, then you would begin to take votes from one candidate and give them to the other. And or you would add in votes or delete votes. And it seems to be a mix. We've done additional analysis, which we'll continue to be publishing, but we originally assumed it was maybe just vote switching. We're now starting to see that there's the digital vote stuffing potentially, and also vote deletion. And there's a difference because you take a vote from one candidate, give it to the other. It's still deletion, but they get a +1. In deletion, you just get rid of it.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Did this happen on the down ballot races?
From our analysis, we are seeing the similar concerns for senatorial races and other down ballot partisan races, meaning there's a Democrat versus a Republican. We're seeing it pretty consistently across not only Pennsylvania, but in Nevada as well. And other states we've not released yet, perhaps Iowa. And we'll talk about that later.
Another really important
That was
state.
another thing too, was that the midterms, they were calling for a red wave, and it absolutely didn't happen. There were so many things leading up to
But the problem is if this
that made it not make sense.
if potentially this is manipulation, what that means is from now on, unless something is changed in our election system and how the votes are counted, we're fucked.
So can I ask, I'm guessing there might be a PowerPoint
see how
slide,
smart
and
I am?
if so, you can just tell me that. So we have 3 main companies for these voting tabulators. 3 main, we're not going to name them, even though I already named them. You're not going to name
Ford, Chevy, Dodge.
them. It would have to be a coordinated effort, and it would have to be done to all 3 companies.
You would have to compromise all of them in perhaps different ways, but still would have to compromise all 3 or 4 major brands.
And that is possible.
But you know what you need? You need some super high-tech geek
It would
with
take,
maybe satellites that orbited the Earth that could possibly. You need some crazy tech guy, and we don't have that. Trump didn't have access to that.
Hypothetically, right? You would need a lot of wealth and a lot of.
So this tech guy would have to be super.
They'd have to. You would have to. Yeah.
Like
so
the
much
richest
money.
man in the world.
You would have to.
Like Dr. Evil. You'd have to have like Dr. Evil or somebody, right? There's no, and that we don't have that.
It would take
Trump
a lot of
didn't even
coordination.
know anybody like that.
It would take a lot of coordination.
So this is just bullshit.
It would take a lot of coordination, but not with anyone specifically necessarily involved in the elections. It could be an outside group.
Maybe.
That's where the tabulation, it'd be a digital attack in nature. And so we hear that a lot. We're like, hey, I was on ground in Clark County, Nevada during the election. I didn't see anything weird. If the tabulation machines are compromised, you wouldn't physically need to be there to do this. And that's the thing, is you don't need to have
algorithm
access.
would kick in at a certain number,
You
and
need
you wouldn't
access.
even notice it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even notice it.
Yeah. And so here's the concern as well is
You got something right. That was good. Okay.
I love it. So that was actually one of the
Super
3. That was one of the 3 analysis we're going to show you.
Good.
Here's the other one. It's very similar. This is your concept of a Russian tail. It's using turnout. So before we were.
So this is what you need to explain this a little bit.
I'll explain this
because this is the one thing that confused me with the other with
so
when I watched
the first analysis I showed you with the scatter plots and the precinct circles and stuff.
Got it.
That one looks at how many votes are cast per precinct. This is similar, but instead of just looking at how many votes are cast, you look at how many votes could have been cast, which is the amount of registered voters. And then you just look at the percentage. So let's say I got 100 people who can vote in a precinct.
Right.
And only 80 show up. That's 80%.
80%.
And that's what this is doing, is using turnout.
I like that he explained that to us.
No, he knows I'm dumb.
If you have 100 people,
and 80 show up, and that's
what
8.
percentage?
8.
Good job.
Am I wrong?
No, you're right. It's
Throw a
good.
0 in there. Yeah. But on the left here is a normal shape.
Okay.
It's a distribution.
This is Romanian presidential election 2014.
Yep. So we're going to look at some comparisons. This is Sergei Shvilkin. He is a election data analyst, if you will. He has been publishing these concerns. He came out with this analysis, and he said, hey, let's look at turnout. So on the left is a more normal distribution. All it's looking at is each of these lines are different parties.
Okay.
And we're just saying, hey, even though one candidate has more votes, the shape is very similar across all 3 parties.
Yeah.
That's the concern here, is we're not seeing any rapid change as more people showed up to vote. That's
Right.
all this
So-
is showing.
Right.
So the turnout is the x-axis, right? It's, hey,
Right. So
how many people show up to vote
Mhm.
Right.
per location, precinct.
location, right?
And then the
it's
left,
pretty consistent across.
It should be consistent. It should be a straight line when we look at it in that other way of seeing it. So this is just showing that, but a little more visual. So on the right is highlighting the concept of a Russian tail. This is a statistical term. This isn't like every Russian
listening,
tail.
The one on the right is Russian presidential election 2000.
Yep, and this is the whole country.
Okay.
I did confuse people because they thought every Russian tail is because of Russia. It's kind of hard to argue that counterpoint in this election, but generally speaking, it's just a concept, and it isn't always Russia. But
pretty much. So let me ask this: Is it where dictators are running shit?
It is where people want to cheat.
Does that seem to be consistent? Wherever people want, okay, good.
Where people want to win or they want to change the outcome of elections, we see
it looks kind of like this.
We see some variation of a Russian tail.
Okay.
In this case, the reason why this is important is we see that as turnout increases from 70%, let's see, a little closer, 80% onwards, we see that green line shift upwards instead of staying.
The green line is Putin.
In this case, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be multiple reasons, but all it's showing is potential manipulation. It could be caused by.
It's hard to see, but it spikes.
And it spikes very aggressively.
Yeah, look at how it shoots up at the end. That's crazy. And that number is right, 500,000?
Yes.
Well,
this is directly from their. Yeah, those are.
So you're saying that people woke up hungover and 500,000 people in the last voted in the last. Is that what that means?
This is for 2000, the Russian presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
This could be potentially caused by any number of vote manipulation. You could be busing people to polls and voting all in mass. You could be
look how the normal thing peters out. Like that's normal. People just stop voting. The voting day's over. Let's go home. And holy shit,
you see some spikes.
Could this also be some sort of digital manipulation? Because as to how many people have voted, and once that threshold is met?
It could be. This alone won't tell you that. That's where you'll look at the actual data and break it down like we're going to continue to do, and we'll show you. But no, this could be caused by ballot stuffing, where it's like you just physically put in extra ballots, and it'll cause a spike in turnout, and then you'll just see change. Because you know why? Is I go vote, I get 100 voters in a precinct, and I'm like, only 50 of them show up to vote, right?
Right.
And so normally you'd see a split or an average or whatever across multiple precincts. Instead, you just, now I'm going to hand deliver you the remaining amount of votes that could have been cast, and they're all for one person. And it's going to cause that.
So 50% of the voters showed up, and then in the last
little bit.
By the way, I just found the other 50% of the votes, and they all happen to be for the same guy.
Yep.
Fuck.
And that's what would cause this. If you did this consistently across every precinct, that's what's causing this. And that's why when we highlight the data here is you're going to have really red or really blue precincts for our elections.
Right.
But all the precincts should not change together. That is a red flag. That is indication of manipulation.
Oh.
Right.
That's what this is highlighting.
All over the place.
This is highlighting that after a certain amount of, or in the places where a certain amount of people voted, after that point, higher turnout, all of them began to change and Putin began to win more. And that's what this is showing. And we're going to highlight this because we recreated this for you. I got one more of these and then I'll show you ours.
Okay.
Here's similar. Different election. This is France. Presidential election on the left.
He really wanted to win in 2012.
Wow. Okay, on the left, guys, France presidential election.
Normal. That's what
it's more normal. Yeah, you don't see any rapid change.
And really consistent for the.
Was this 2012?
On the left, it was. I'll have to double check, but I believe their election. It was one of their presidential elections.
Oh, that was with Le Pen.
Round one.
Yeah.
I don't remember the date.
And my question is this: this looks like what all elections kind of look like for the last 40 years, right? On the left.
No.
No,
it does not. The last 15 years or so has been interesting. Prior to that, it's harder to get this level of data, but we'll show some other elections in other countries when we do the last
I
analysis.
just mean for America, it's pretty much look like that. We haven't really been screwing with it that much, have we? Has it?
It's hard to say.
Because again, I'm always looking for the facts. I'm always trying to figure out if you can repeat the right picture in America in 1960, 1980 or something like that, then I go, well, I don't know if we have the right evidence. But if you can't produce this up until we've got to 2020 and 2024, that makes a lot more sense to me. Because that, by the way, that's pretty nuts.
Here's the problem with our election system. We've only recently, in the last 2 to 3 elections, began to keep the level of data you need to do this analysis.
Got
And we've only in the last 20 years had the capability to do this.
Got it. Okay.
Because you need computers and you need the tools. And you're doing this by hand before you're doing this by.
Right.
So we only have sufficient data to really go back just to 2020 and barely to 2016. And as we can, kind of highlight, we're seeing concerns even then. I met with a individual named Dr. Elizabeth Clarkson. She has a PhD in statistics.
I heard about her.
In Kansas. She actually
yes, I just
she had
listened
a
to her
lawsuit.
today.
And she saw the same issues local to her of weird change as turnout increased in her areas in 2016.
Really?
And she filed lawsuits to try and audit, and she never got her hands on the votes then because there were a couple hurdles, and they ultimately just said, "Hey, we're not going to let you do it."
She went to the state Supreme Court even trying to get them right, and
I think they're
not done fighting. She's looking for legal assistance to continue this fight. I just listened to that today.
So
that
you
was
can
good.
see in the Russian president in 2012, you can really see that thing at the end is nuts. Like that is a guarantee that he wins. That spike in votes is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, keep going.
Indication of manipulation.
Yeah.
So we recreated it in our far easier to comprehend colors. And here is Philadelphia.
Thank you.
Yes. And so on the left here is mail-in. We didn't label the top for this. You'll see them on the next ones. But the left is mail-in. These are new. Just recently in our reports.
And you can see it just follows the exact curve as that the French election was following.
Very similar. Similar. So you were asking, hey, does our elections look like this? The mail-in generally does.
Yep.
Some of like California generally does. So, but we vote by counties and then by states. So it's almost 50 elections when we do, our thing. So we have 50 different sets of data that we can look at. And that's why we're able to do this today, is we have so much data and so many baselines that we're now looking at how can we match, how can we prove this is consistent.
You have enough baseline of stuff that wasn't manipulated to see when things are.
Yes. And that was the concern, is no one truly knew what normal looked like before we started digging into it and testing it time and time again in our elections.
So on this one, the Russian tail is the bright red.
On the right, that is election day for Philadelphia. And you see, this is also measured in turnout. The next graphs will have like the fancy x-axis. But yeah, you're seeing that change happen at higher turnout. And it just overtakes the amount of Democratic votes in places where more people voted.
What that would say is, so 58% turnout, all of a sudden votes start going to Trump. That would mean that if the machines had been manipulated potentially, that would mean that they clicked in at a certain number of votes cast.
Yes.
That would mean that things started, so they kept everything normal, so there wasn't any big red flags. And then
threshold was met.
Once people are past a certain thing, it starts switching, changing, or adding. And then what happens is, that's why Steve Kornacki, I remember when it was going down, I remember Kornacki was like, wait, we've had some big changes here. Do you remember this, watching this? Mm-hmm. And we were like, what? I remember us fucking freaking the fuck out. Like, wait, why, how, what did old people who mostly Republican vote early? They don't go late. I kept thinking, I go, what? So they all slept in and then went on the last part of the day?
You start to get redder and redder throughout the day. Yeah. If it's election day, so if there was a vote changing or whatever manipulation,
potentially,
if there was a potential tabulation issue,
potential alleged,
what you would see is that throughout the day, as more people turned up to vote in these locations, after that threshold is met, and then as you continued voting throughout the day, you would get more and more votes. It would get redder and redder in this case if there was manipulation. Here's something I want to highlight for you.
Okay.
So this is interesting. This is Philadelphia. Harris still won Philadelphia. So why would you care about manipulating these places?
So it looked consistent all across the board. So you couldn't. So the data wasn't too obvious.
Here's something.
What do you think?
Here's a concern. How do you?
Dumb guy spoke. You like
no. You're fine.
Guy. I'm fine.
but it's a good question, because you're like, hey, would you do this to make it look normal, consistent? Consistency is the key. Here's the thing: how do you win a state?
By the most votes.
You get the most votes.
Right.
You get the popular vote. Doesn't matter what counties you win or lose.
Right.
You get more votes. So if my demographic of voters doesn't live in the big cities, and I only have so many of them, how do I impact those places with a lot of voters where they're more liberal? I either have to get more of my people to show up and vote, or I have to get less of their people to show up.
We do this, or potentially the machines are manipulated so at a certain number of votes, even though Kamala won because it would have been too obvious that she lost Philadelphia.
How many bomb threats were in Pennsylvania?
I think they had 32 or more.
He said 30. It was 32.
Yeah, at least 32.
Wow.
So that would make all the rural districts. This would add to the rural districts vote, so he'd win the popular vote. Got it. That makes sense.
You have to reduce the amount of votes in the denser areas.
Yep.
That's how you'd win a state.
Yep.
And that's what we're potentially seeing is, even though this isn't enough to change the outcome of that county, this is enough to shift. If you did this across multiple counties,
right,
this would be enough to shift the outcome of the state because you took the amount of votes.
Win the state.
Then you win the swing state.
Right.
So this is very interesting. We see
so
this.
You shave it. So basically what you're doing, although she's still going to win, you're just shaving. You're just shaving,
reducing.
adding to your vote totals. So what ends up happening, even though you kick ass in the rural areas, in the very blue areas, you can't win them because that would be too obvious. What you do is you just take 4,000.
Take a little bit off the top.
You take 4,000, 15,000 votes, and she still wins.
Just that county, though.
Yeah, just that
right.
county.
And you win
right,
the state.
got it.
Right.
And here's what's interesting is we don't see this just in Philadelphia. We've seen this in multiple counties, even the smaller counties as well. It almost seems to be, if you compromise the tabulators, anywhere a lot of people are voting on these systems, you're going to try and do this.
And this is why he kept complaining about mail-in voting, because for some reason they can't manipulate the mail-in vote, but they could sure shit manipulate the election.
But why couldn't they? If
this is a great question.
Into a tabulator.
Although they use the same machines generally, sometimes they have slightly different variations. The problem is it's the accountability of the hand cast votes. People mail in their votes. Election day, you got to get it all done in one day. You got to get it all processed in one day.
Yeah.
Mail in, you can send them in early, and there's still a paper trail, and they go to the county level, I believe. It's not by precincts, not by location. So you got a larger window, and the problem is, let's say, hey, I just got mail-in votes. I just got 5,000 votes sent in, and I run it through the machine, and I'm getting less than 5,000 votes on the back end, and it's not like, hey, we need this done today. We have more time. The concern is it may be a risk that they didn't want to take. If they were doing this,
because she said paper trail. There's a paper trail. I have evidence how I voted, and you motherfuckers, that's not how I voted.
Yeah, there's a concern if you could have caught this if you went really heavy on mail in.
Good. All right.
Yep. So maybe they decided not to. We do have a little
follow-up question to this is related to my other question from a couple slides ago about the counting the mail-in votes. I'm looking for a smoking gun. Is there a way to look at the mail-in votes that are spiking on election day versus the amount of people that can actually process the vote? We know how many staff there are. We know how many precincts there are. We know how many.
Here's what I think about that.
Does that make sense?
I hear what you're asking.
You lost me there on that one.
You lost me too. I fell asleep.
I hang out with Ken, so I understand what he's saying. What he's saying is you have all these Republican poll workers. The problem is this: you can't, with something like this, it would have to be machine operated, because you can't have witnesses, because always somebody would talk. So you couldn't have the poll workers feeding in the mailbox and running them wrong. Right. Because someone would know. Someone would know, and it would get out. Someone was going to go to Thanksgiving and be like, "You ain't going to believe how we made Trump win."
Yeah, and also I'm maybe grasping
There's
straws.
a demographic you were targeting there, weren't you? Into mind.
How can we tie this data to real world evidence to say, here's the smoking gun.
Yes.
This ties to there is fraud here, because that physically cannot happen. I rest my case.
No, all right, I understand now. So what he's asking is, if we were to look at these precincts or these places where we're seeing a sudden and rapid shift of votes for one candidate to the other, and we look at the amount of Democrats in that area or Republicans in that area, does it line up? That's your smoking gun. We did that for Clark County, Nevada. We did that for early voting in Clark County, Nevada. They have early voting. And the concern is the same for we're seeing in Pennsylvania. We're seeing the same after X amount of votes in these places, just rapid and consistent growth for one candidate. And we mapped.
After X amount of votes,
one
candidate starts shooting up.
Yep.
And there's no reason, and there's no other There's no
It doesn't
other-
match demographics.
It doesn't match demographics. It also doesn't match the normal mail-in voting.
Yep.
And again, I go back to the witnesses. No witnesses. You couldn't manipulate the mail-in vote because people would have to know.
Can
It'd
I
be
ask
harder, much
Yeah,
harder.
harder, yeah.
I have a dummy question because I have
Those are
not
mine.
voted in person in
Mhm.
years. I always vote by mail. Are some ballots 100% digital now? That's different in each precinct, right? Some are still fill in or
There are.
punch,
It depends.
and some are on the screen and they're fully digital, right?
Yeah, there's a couple different types depending on what systems you're using. There's like, they'll give you a paper vote or a paper ballot and you'll fill it out and then you'll submit it and it'll still get scanned by the machine.
Mhm.
And then there's machines that are like actual touchscreen. You go up and you
Mhm.
vote and then it'll either print off your ballot and it'll
Right.
still get fed, or it'll be saved and that'll be transferred. And then there's a little tape on the side that it'll print your vote on that tape. It's sealed, but you
So
can see it on the
proofs, yeah.
screen.
So
And
there
then it'll
is still a
receipt.
paper trail.
There is still a paper
for
trail.
election day ballots.
In Pennsylvania, in Clark County, Nevada. I think Georgia may be completely digital and not have. Don't quote me on that one, but generally speaking, there are paper votes to look at.
I want to point out to everybody who's looking at this graph, and because I understand how dense it is for our people, we're just usually just going, but you screaming and stuff. But if you look at the bright red at the end, once the votes hit a certain level, all of a sudden, for no reason, no valid reason, everything changes and votes start shooting up for one candidate.
Yeah.
That is unusual and weird.
Yes. And there's one more county we'll highlight. This is Erie
Oh,
County. This is a little aggressive,
yeah, they
little
weren't
crazy.
fucking around in Erie.
Mhm. So same concerns, mail-in. We don't really see rapid
It
change.
doesn't match at all.
And then
No.
election day is very aggressive, very rapid change.
Wonder why Erie? Wonder why Erie?
Well, if you look at,
I think Erie is the third largest.
I think it's
right?
either the third or the fifth. I think it's the third.
Ah.
The concern here is when you break down the data, you want to look at how are people voting and where are they voting. And if they only have X amount of, however you've designed the algorithm, anywhere that more people are voting on only a few, locations, it's going to potentially change more.
Right.
Philadelphia, a lot of machines, a lot of places to vote, a lot of places to tabulate. But if you get smaller locations but more dense, you would theoretically see rapid change in some of those places,
Can I
and
point
we're
something?
seeing that in Erie.
Biden
Can I help
won
explain?
Erie.
Can I help explain the graph? So if you
Yes.
guys look at the opening of the graph on election day, you'll see that she's really overperforming at the beginning of the day, and as they hit the voter threshold, what ends up happening is all of a sudden everything goes to Trump. Now, if she started performing that way early, that would have been consistent throughout the day. There's no reason for her to. And if you look at the mail-in vote, you can see her overperforming. Why? How the fuck? There's no way that everybody, all the Democrats sent their mail-in vote, and then all of a sudden look at the craziness on election day. And it didn't do it from the jump. Had it done it from the jump, it'd be a lot harder to prove. It does it when you guys hit a certain number of votes. That's fucked up,
Yeah,
man.
what you highlight there is it's a trend.
Holy
So we're looking at
shit.
the
But
trend.
also what you said, Harris, Democrats are more likely to mail in
Mhm.
their ballots.
Now,
That's not true.
Here's-
In Florida, they said old people mail in like crazy.
well, here's something to highlight: is it's not who got more votes or whatnot. It's how does it change
Yeah.
as more
Yes,
people turn out
that's
to
what I'm
vote.
saying.
Right.
And so, if Trump was more popular on election day, we would see from the beginning, as you said,
Yeah, from
Right.
the
he
jump.
should be.
Right.
It should be a mirror, like an inverse of mail-in,
Yeah.
right? If it was red and then a
Right.
little bit of blue,
The-
but instead we only see him take over closer to 50% turnout.
Once the threshold
Once
is
the
hit.
thresholds are hit. So
Okay.
here's your Russian tail analysis, and then we're going to get into this last little bit, and this
Yeah,
is
'cause I'm gonna need
this
to
is your
sleep.
turnout, your scatter plot, and we'll roll
My
through this real
brain
quick. Yeah,
hurts. My
we'll roll
brain.
through this real quick. But you were asking, hey, how can we visualize this a little better? This is going to be a little more insane. It's similar to what we were looking at before with the scatter plots,
Right.
but this is turnout. So this is looking at how does it shift and how do the precincts change. Here's your mail-in, your baseline, right?
Okay.
Okay.
On the left is what you've seen before, the amount of votes per precinct. On the right is turnout percent. And so what we're going to see, Erie County, Allegheny County, mail-in, and, well, we'll go back. Erie County and Allegheny County look pretty normal. It should be more of a straight line. Generally is speaking. And you see that on the right is the turnout. It's more of a blob straight line. We don't see any rapid shifts up or down as turnout increases. Now we're going to show you, remember when you asked me, could you cheat mail-in? You could. Would you? You probably wouldn't want to. It'd be decently, well, depends on how you're potentially cheating. If you're stuffing votes, you don't want to do that in mail-in unless you know who's going to vote, right? Well, where are you going to get those votes from?
Right. Exactly.
So if I were to have done a poll or would have done a way for you to register, if you were a voter and you could vote and you wanted to win money for being engaged in voting and you were to register to my, my reward system and I were to get your voting information, I would then be able to take that voting information at the end of the day, check and see if you voted, if I had access to the tabulation system, and then add your vote in for you. The thing is, you can't easily do that with mail-in.
Because you paid people for their information.
And you couldn't easily do it with mail-in because it's generally done before election day.
Right.
Again, to have to do that, you'd probably need like the richest guy in the world.
You need a lot.
He'd have to have a lot of access to technology.
And he would also maybe offer $1 million a day to people just for being
there. And who's
there.
going to do that? Who's going to actually...
But you have
it's unreasonable to expect
do you know
someone...
what's crazy about this?
This is where you start to lose me, my friend.
Yeah.
In comedy, that's the whole game. And that's how Dane Cook blew up. He was the first guy to really build his MySpace presence and get people's data after each show. So Joe Coy does it. You can't take a picture with Joe. He has someone take the pictures, but you have to enter your information. And then that's how the whole game, even in comedy, is gathering people's info.
Which is why he wants all the IRS data. To explain this.
Here's mail-in for Philadelphia. I have a question for you. Does this look like a straight line for both candidates?
No.
What does it look like? Same way you read it. The x-axis. Okay. X-axis is turnout, right? So no people showed up to vote on the left. And then as you get closer, the reason why it stops at 50% is this is mail-in. This is half of the votes. Okay. So turnout is like half of the voters voted. Well, at most 40% of the voters voted by mail-in in a precinct. And then the other half or whatever voted election day. So here's the concern. We don't see a straight line. Instead, we see a majority of the votes are sitting between 180% for Harris and 20 and closer to 0% for Trump. What's interesting is we see it's stretched down for the Democrats and up for the Republicans a little more randomly, but we don't see a straight line here. And so what would cause this? And why are we not seeing a straight line as we would expect to see? Like we see in every other mail-in.
You've shown us a bunch, Right.
So this could be indication of ballot stuffing, where you were to add in mail-in voting or, and as we said, if you had the capability to do this digitally with tabulator machines, you may not actually need people's voting information to do it. You just add in a 1.
We're going to put a quote right here.
But in this case, we're not sure exactly what they're doing.
Where the guy that won said something about somebody knew those machines. Somebody really knows those machines in Pennsylvania.
Thank you to Elon. He journeyed to Pennsylvania where he spent like a month and a half campaigning for me, and he was very effective. And he knows those computers better than anybody, all those computers, those vote counting computers. And we ended up winning Pennsylvania like in a landslide. So it was pretty good. It was pretty good. So thank you to Elon.
I'm not sure exactly what is going on here, but this is potentially weird. This is very weird. This needs to be looked into deeper.
This is such an anomaly. It needs to be.
And this is mail-in.
This is mail-in.
And this is mail-in.
But it's also mail-in in a big city. So probably have more access. And because it's a big city, that's where you want to put the time in because that's where the most votes are, specifically if you wanted to win that state.
It would make sense if you're trying to bring down, And so now we're going to look at election day.
So how would you get away with ballot
Oh, wait, sorry. Do I want to go back?
How would you get away with ballot stuffing?
You couldn't do it with people. You'd have to do it with potentially you'd have to do it with the machines themselves.
Generally speaking, who knows?
Unless you had a bunch of people that all worked suddenly in the precincts and were helping run the elections.
Okay, but again, then you have witnesses and somebody would talk.
Right.
And the
Especially
thing is,
now after he's fucked everything up. Somebody would say, hey, this is bullshit.
right.
Somebody would talk.
Generally, you'd expect. The problem that we're highlighting is we don't truly know. Right. All the data tells us is something's going on here. It could be caused by manipulation, but until we audit, until we check the real votes that were cast,
Right.
we don't truly
That's
know.
what she was saying
And
on the video I just watched today, that
Elizabeth
we
Clarkson.
don't have proof because the proof is actually that ballot, holding that ballot
The
and
proof,
looking.
And
the
you
proof
guys-
is in the paper.
And
Yes.
you guys need to sue to get the rights to look
Yes.
at that. And that's guys, that's what, once again, I'm going to ask you to donate to ETA because they are going to use that money to go after these votes so we can prove this.
So I've hired, as of right now, I've hired 2 different legal teams with the donations we have received so far, just to set up those teams and get them building the cases.
Well, I'm going to donate. I mean, when I'm done with today, I'm going to donate.
Yeah. I've never paid a lawyer in my life. I didn't realize how expensive and how much work.
Oh, I have. I've been through a divorce, my friend.
And they round up. To
And they
every
round up.
15
Yeah.
minutes.
So they do.
Hang up. I used to tell them, hang up.
And
Because
these
if
lawyers,
you talk 16, you get charged for
and
30.
I already hate lawyers, but these
By the
guys
hour.
that capitulated to Trump,
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't believe I could hate
Twats.
lawyers. How do I hate lawyers more? You mean you have less of a soul? Fuck, how's that possible? So explain Philadelphia election day.
This
I can
looks
see
Crazy.
it's the arc.
Yeah.
Look, so the arc goes down. So you can see again where
Oh.
everything starts to change.
It's more of a cornucopia.
Yeah, cornucopia goes up it starts to change for Trump. Everything's kind of normal, and then it starts to angle up for Trump, and then it angles down for Kamala. In Philly, that's crazy. And wow, I don't. Now, do we have the same? Well, you showed us the Russian tales that we had in Philadelphia. All right,
You've seen the Russian tales. This is just another way of visualizing why.
Yeah,
Why is that happening?
First time I watched this, I didn't get the graph. I just got it.
Now you get it, right? These
Yeah,
are the precincts.
I just got it.
So people are
Right.
saying, hey, could this be caused by like really, really blue or really red precincts? Well, the problem is we're seeing as turnout is increasing, all of those precincts are shifting
Yep.
in vote share. And so in this case, it pulls down the Democrats' votes and brings up the Republican
And
votes.
it
that's
should
why.
just be consistent. In
Should
any
be
other
straight
election, it should just be
Should
craziness,
be more,
right?
yeah.
Right, yeah.
And
And
that
In this
everybody's-
case, it should be more of a straight line.
And
Because what
that
happens
is
is-
the greatest anomaly is that the Republican votes, it's the same exact pattern.
Exactly.
reverse.
It'll be mirrored because there's only 2 parties here.
Right.
And in this case, and this is why this is important, right? If you take votes from one candidate
Right.
and give them to the other, it's going to cause that candidate to lose votes and drop and the other candidate to
So
grow.
the mirror
And the
would
mirroring
happen.
is a symptom.
Okay.
If we had 3 parties,
Yeah.
this would look completely different.
Okay.
But in this case, because we only have 2 large prominent parties,
And where do you think
But
that's
also-
happening?
but also-
At what percentage of turnout?
this is good.
It makes no sense that the vote would change as the day went on. It makes no sense that as the vote thing hit, so as people continued on and put more votes in, it makes absolutely, it would be fucking consistent throughout the whole day. It would be the same it
Where?
wouldn't
How
change.
many? Where do you think that changed?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the Wisconsin State Supreme Court?
I think that the race that just went
the
through.
race
Yeah.
that just
Yeah,
went
we
through
were so
I told him
did
that
you-
was a big deal.
It was a big deal. Did you watch that kind of happen throughout the night? So in the beginning, the candidate that ultimately went on to win, right off the bat, after an hour or so, after 20-30% reporting, was 100 to 200,000 votes ahead and stayed 100 to 2,000 votes, even from 30% of the votes to 100% of the votes cast. And that is more normal because we shouldn't see, statistically speaking, everyone assumes, hey, things would change. No, it's going to stay the same because
Right,
we're working with millions of people.
right.
And each of these places, it's not one voter that we're looking at on the map, right?
Right.
We're looking at a average across every place.
There's no way that at a certain number, the Republicans just showed up later in the day. That's fucking impossible.
It would require every precinct after that amount
Right.
to all collectively show up.
Hey guys, everybody,
And
everybody,
vote one way.
everybody at 3:00. We're gonna just fucking go. We're gonna just flood the place.
Yep.
All right, everybody, who's in? High five.
What percentage? So here's the problem. When we look at turnout, in this case, the concern is what are they doing? If you're taking votes from one candidate, giving it to the other, you should see as you get further right change. But in
Yeah.
this case, we're seeing up and down movement
Yeah.
well before some of the turnout is met. That could suggest something in addition to vote switching.
Hmm.
And so in this case, it's far more muddy. This could be caused as well, as we said, by adding in votes right off the bat, which would be a little different than what we're used to, right? We were
Right.
expecting, hey, you only do it after a certain point. So we're seeing indication of multiple things going on here in Pennsylvania alone.
Which, by the way, makes total sense. If you're going to do this, let's say if you were going to attack an American election,
Mhm.
the one thing you don't want to do is do one thing.
Right.
You want to do as much things as possible to manipulate it, to basically muddy it. So like we're talking about it right now, it's like
You're
could
confusing us with
you basically
yeah.
what happens is you have a defense.
Hmm.
You have what are you kidding me? It's all
But
over the place.
How would you add in votes?
Yeah, that
It's a great question. If you had access to the tabulation machines, which count the votes,
Mhm.
then if you had the voting information, and depending on how that works, you could add them in at the close of the polling locations, where
But
you would see
again,
a spike,
would,
at higher turnout.
You would need a high tech
But you would
guy
need
that
to
knew
know-
computers.
you need to know their
Did it-
information.
Vote.
You would.
Guys, this couldn't happen. You'd have to have a guy intimately involved in the election that was a super high tech, ridiculously rich guy that could get into the machine somehow and
You'd
figure
have
out how
to,
to do it. It couldn't happen.
You'd have to almost have your own system co-located in some
Right.
voting locations,
Right.
or have digital access to the
Mhm.
voting servers or systems or whatever. It would really require a lot of effort and
A lot of effort, a lot of
just,
money.
that wouldn't be like reasonable for a normal person to do. They wouldn't have pulled this off.
Right. But we're not talking about a normal person.
All right, what else? We
All
got?
right, yeah.
And then I want to kind of when we get to the end of it,
Allegedly.
I want to hear a summary from you,
Yeah.
that what you think. And this is just your theory. Okay.
And then so that was Philadelphia, and then here's your Erie County. Remember we said, whoa, why is it jumping up so much?
Wow, it did it again.
You see an
Holy
X.
shit.
You see it very aggressively.
Now that the X
50% turnout, and then it starts. So
look at it, 50%.
it's the trend. You start at lower
Yeah.
turnout. Harris is 60 to 80% across these precincts, and it's more variation. That's the point. Is we should see, some blue that are higher, some blue that are lower. But the point is,
Holy shit.
you start off consistent, and then out of nowhere, after a certain amount of people are showing up in these precincts, turnout can be a little confusing because there's an argument of saying, hey, if I only have 100 people registered in a precinct and 80 people show up, or at 80% turnout. In this case, I'll show you the actual data. These precincts are all generally the same field and sizes. We're looking at 800 to 1,000. So
literally at
Wow.
50% of the vote, everything just switches. That's
Yep.
fucking nuts.
it becomes a very aggressive X. All right.
Wait, X.
Maybe a conspiracy. Reaching there. But I did find it funny. I didn't even think of this before, but 88 counties is what we talked about before.
Right, what he flipped to?
I mean, 88, 8, letter 8, 8,
Infinity.
There's some connotation with double H when it comes to certain
that's right,
groups
yeah.
as well.
Oh yeah. The
but
double A.
that's-
Oh, you're right. The double eights also.
But that's just
like when you throw up the
random.
Hitler high five. It's the same groups. They like those numbers.
That wouldn't be connected.
Not
that-
at all.
This
I don't
is
think
just
so.
something.
We're just stupid. We've been drinking. Go ahead.
And then here's your Allegheny. Same concern. Rapid shift. You got that X again.
What the fuck? That's
This is
impossible.
This is
That
just 3
means-
counties.
So that means during the middle of the day, for some reason, all the Republicans showed up at halfway through the day and started pounding votes in. That doesn't make any sense at all. And that's
In some of the most liberal counties in the state.
in the most liberal counties.
Wow.
Statistically, this is impossible. It's statistically.
This is so statistically concerning that this warrants investigations.
Right.
This warrants audits. And if you don't do them, you cannot trust future elections to
But
be.
why didn't,
Why-
in that time after this election, before they left office, this is what made us crazy. It just went silent. Why didn't Biden have
I have a
the
theory.
DOJ?
I have a theory.
Okay.
So here's my theory. The reason they didn't do it because Trump did something, and listen, if Trump had used what he knows to be a decent human being, I think he'd be a decent human being. But what he's done is, by saying for the last 4 years, 8 years, or last 4 years, election was rigged.
Right.
And then failing 62 times in court, and then failing again, then having the cyber ninjas come in and go, nope, as a matter of fact, we found 400 more votes for Biden. So if the Democrats do the same thing now, we just look like bitches. We just look like, oh, look at it. The difference is they don't have any data. They don't have him.
Right.
So the different and the ETA, you guys, they don't have you guys. So this shows, again, fact me or fuck off. But you're facting me pretty hard here, man. And I'm liking it.
And you'd asked me.
It got weird.
You asked me before.
it always does.
By the way, it took this long because Ken's not here. It would have got weird way earlier if Ken was sitting here.
But, you asked me, are we seeing this in the down ballot races, the senatorial races, the other races? Yes. Here's
all the races.
Okay.
There's just Senate.
Okay, this is Senate.
So we're seeing the concern in every partisan race in these 3 counties we've looked at so far.
And at 50%, it kicks.
It varies depending on some places. Some places, their precincts could be a little smaller depending on county. Some could be a little bigger, and so it'll shift left and right. But nonetheless, we see this trend. As turnout increases, one candidate is jumping up in the amount of votes they're getting across all the precincts, and the other is dropping down.
So it's not one precinct. It's not their precinct called in. It's like when Kornacki counts it down on MSNBC, right. And he's like,
it's a really blue.
It's a really red county. It's like all precincts it goes up.
Yep. And that's
impossible.
They stay, and it's consistent. It's across all of them, and it's consistent, and it stays consistent. So, as I said before, people are asking me, hey,
I feel bad for Ken. This one's going to be a long one to edit.
This one's a little confusing for you, but all I did, the reason why I threw this up here is
this is important though. This needs to be done.
This is your precinct sizes. So on the left is Philadelphia, mail-in. Mm-hmm. Then on the right is precincts for election day. And so people ask me this. They said, hey, this could be caused, right, by all of the Republicans showing up in all their really small precincts, and it'd be like 100% show up. We got 100 Republicans, or you got like 100 voters. Yeah. 60, 70, 80% of them are all Republicans, really small, really rural area, and they're all showing up. And now your turnout looks like this. No, what this shows is the width of each bar for each candidate is their size of their precincts. These are all the precincts stacked on top of each other. Mail-in. Remember, we looked at the Russian tail.
Yep.
We don't see a Russian tail here for mail-in on the left. The blue is Harris for this case. Mm-hmm. The red/orange is Trump. We don't see like a Russian tail. We don't see any weird change as turnout increases. On the right, we see that Russian tail popping up in this case. We see it's not the really small precincts. If it was the really small precincts, it would be a thin line.
It's a thick line.
But we're seeing thicker. We're seeing the thicker lines at those turnouts.
So what that does, again,
the bigger precincts,
more
votes.
Guys, if you're looking at this, and I know you're looking on the camera, what he's showing you at the end there, when you see all those orange lines or those beige lines going up like that, that means at the end of the day, for some reason, thousands of voters just happen to come in and vote for Trump. Just happen to at the end of the day. Like they do in Russia. Fuck. That's funny.
In the larger precincts.
In the big precincts. In the larger precincts, which are mostly blue in Philly.
Yes.
Holy shit.
That is the concern. All right. And
I like that you're saying it so nice. I'm about to start breaking shit.
Here's our last analysis. Okay. So those last two you saw, I don't think I explained truly, but Roman Udot, he's a election expert and a data analyst and technically a statistician that worked for Russia, was in Russia, and had then began to publish concerns of Russian elections and left Russia.
Explain what heat map analysis.
So I will, but his analysis was more based on that turnout we saw in the Russian tail. So he has already done that work and published his paper, and we based that analysis off of his work.
Got it.
And then in this case, this is Peter Klimek. And so he and others had produced this on the left, a paper talking about heat maps and elections. So you see we have 4 different elections up here. Right. Russia in 11, Russia in 12, Uganda, and Switzerland. So what you want to know here is which of these is normal, which of these is not. On the right section of graphs, that is a fair modeled election. It's going to be a circle with a high density in the middle, and then it's just going to be, a little bit of an orb, a glob, a ball. It's going to be a ball. So we see on the right is what it should look like. On the left is the real data, and then the middle is trying to like overlap. On the left is Russia in 11 and 12, and we see a comet trail, if you will. And what's happening is as turnout's increasing,
the votes
are growing.
Yeah. Whatever happened, they were drunk on vodka, and at the end of the day, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people are showing up to vote for Putin.
Yep. And then Uganda, we see something different, but just as concerning, where it's shifting up and to the right. And then Switzerland, we see almost a normal,
pretty consistent.
Yeah. And so what we're going to look at then is we did this analysis.
Well, I'm moving to Switzerland, by the way. Uganda's out.
This is going to be awful.
We made the joke of how fair are our elections on a scale from Switzerland to Uganda to Russia. And we're gonna find you're gonna be concerned when we do this. So here's a couple more baselines for you. So this is a real thing. This is Ohio.
Okay.
This is their state board nonpartisan election. More normal, right? This is what we would expect to see.
That's state board. That's just local state. This is
that's their state board stuff. Down ballot. This is a nonpartisan race. Looks like a ball. So that's what we should expect to see in our races. We've established this now. Yeah. Now we're going to look at mail-in for Erie. More of a ball. We're not seeing any weird stretching as turnout increases. No, it's a ball. Consistent. Now we're going to look at Erie on election day.
We got a bit of a comet thing.
It oddly has the shape of Russia's election.
It looks very similar,
doesn't it?
So what we're seeing, this is the same analysis we've seen time and time again as turnout increases in all of the precincts in the county. We're seeing this is for Trump specifically. We're only showing Trump here.
I want to be clear. I want everybody to hear this. In every precinct, we're not just talking about red precincts. It goes up at the end of the day. We're talking Democrat and Republican precincts all day. But as we hit a certain threshold, all of a sudden the votes start going to the Republican.
Yes.
Holy shit.
And not just the presidential race, the Senate race, and other races too. And if there was manipulation, in this case, we started to estimate how much.
Okay.
We'll publish more of those numbers as we go forward.
Roughly, what do you think?
In some of these places,
what are your potential numbers showing you?
Let's just say
those will be on your website soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's just say that if this is accurate and the data is correct, this would have been sufficient in so here's the thing. These are just 3 counties in Pennsylvania. If it happened in all 3 of these counties and a few others, it is enough to change the outcome of not only the state, but if this occurred in Nevada, this occurred in Wisconsin,
all the swing states,
it would have been enough to change the outcome of the election.
Mm-hmm.
And they still only won by less than Hillary beat him by.
So. Yeah, that was oddly close if this were potentially manipulated. But that would have been the goal, to not make it look as obvious as Putin. Putin now doesn't give a shit.
We do see that in Clark County, Nevada, where after that 250 votes or so is met and you begin to change the amount of votes, Trump, in this case, in Nevada and Clark County early voting, he sits at 60%. Instead of going up to 100 or so it's almost like you capped it. And the reason you do that is, you don't need to win more than 60% of the votes.
I have a question about that because we haven't really had that. So in 2020, so this is what I got from the first time I watched this. In 2020, it seemed like the machines, everything was set to, you said per machine. They were set at.
I can show you that here in a second if you.
I would love that because some of the smaller counties, they showed a real normal election that had less than 250 votes.
Well, hold that thought then. Let's finish the last 2, and then I'll show you that real quick. And you're gonna have to. All right. Here we go.
Oh,
Allegheny.
No.
Here we go.
What the fuck?
So you don't have a comet trail here. You have a comet of manipulation, potential manipulation. And it's election day is the middle. So that's what you care about. On the right is you're combining the 2 and they average out.
Left, so mail in. A ball, kind of a ball.
More normal. More normal.
And
then Allegheny, you see that up and to the right. And then, of course, you see this for Philadelphia as well. There's your comet trail.
This is graph porn. You love graphs, man. I have never seen anybody. You could have shown us in one stop. You're like, nah.
3 different ways.
5 or 7 styles of
because
graphs.
people, I've spent 4 months. Right. I lost my job to be here to do this because I worked in cybersecurity. I worked for organizations. I worked for the government, the banks, and everything. And as soon as I said, hey, I'm going to publish this stuff, they said, hey, you can't work here anymore. So I have nowhere else to go but to fight this fight.
By the way, and
we're going to show the data.
Election day is, wow.
There's your comet trail.
Wow.
Remember we said mail-in was normal?
Yeah.
Here's Philly. Here's Philadelphia
little
for
comet show.
mail-in.
Little comet show.
It's not looking normal for mail-in for
And
Philadelphia.
they needed it because Philly. Okay, so because Pennsylvania would have so many delegates. What am I? Electoral votes. Because Philly had so
19.
they needed to manipulate Philly because Philly is such a
it's a good amount of the votes.
population center. They had to. So I understand, like, this is a big undertaking. I understand in certain swing states, you didn't have to do this, but in Philly and the ones you really needed, you would put extra effort into manipulating the vote. And that would take Jesus.
That would take Jesus. You're right.
This would take a lot.
Mm-hmm.
No, Jesus had nothing to do with this. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And the concern as well is in order to truly pull this off, you'd have to have compromised a lot. And this would be to pull this off in one election is difficult. You would almost have to have done this and been working this for multiple elections.
Maybe like the last election. Maybe attempt it. Maybe see if you could see it and see how it works.
And so I do have a little bit of that.
Wait, are you saying it's possible? Is there some weird data from
I have some data for 2020 if you want to look at it.
Holy shit.
All right, we'll throw it up. And here's our conclusion of this PowerPoint. Verify the vote is our hashtag. And then
verify the vote, guys. Truth matters.
And then electiontruithalliance.org. We're going to keep posting all of our stuff on our website. So
guys,
all of this report isn't on the website, but a written Pennsylvania analysis is. So you can actually go download it as well.
Election Truth Alliance people, go check them out.
And
help us out. $5, $10, whatever you need. Let's get some attorneys going on this, and let's at least see what happens.
I'll pull up the last little bit.
Do you want to save America? I don't want to go to civil war. Let's just do it this way.
What is the cost of our democracy? Is the great question, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's a price that I would be willing to pay, no matter the price.
Oh, I'm donating tonight.
And then while I'm pulling this up,
I'm helping to promote it, and I'm still going to donate.
I love it. All right, while I'm pulling this up, I'll tell you a little bit. I didn't really talk about this, but me being prior military for 25 Bravo, you're familiar. Military takes an oath, right?
Right.
And so, are you familiar with that oath?
You're also kind of uber nerdy about this, which is great because you're getting
to defend the Constitution.
Take the oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic.
Enemies, foreign and domestic. The Constitution is the priority. Yep. Obviously, you accept lawful orders for the officers above you, but the Constitution comes first. And so, the reason why I care about this, and the reason why even I revealed who I was to get to this point. Right, I was anonymous before I was publishing this stuff, working with Jive and Lily, but Jessica Dinson, who's been kind of covering the whole election stuff. I was able to go on her live stream. She gave me an opportunity. We convinced her, said, hey, she was originally on, I think, Metis, how do you pronounce their name?
Midas Touch.
So she was one of theirs and then had left to do her own thing. And she let me do it. But she said, hey, I don't think you can do this unless it's credible and you're going to have to reveal who you are and your background to do it.
Yep.
And I sat down and my first thought was, with the work I do, and my concern was, it's probably going to cost me my job. It's probably going to put a target on my back and my family and everyone that's near me, right? And it was kind of that situation: is do I think this is real enough and that this is a big deal and it deserves that attention? Is it worth my life? Right? Is it worth everything I have to pay this? And it took me about 5 minutes before I was like.
So can I tell you something? My family's been here. So I found out my family's been here since 1635. My entire job, stand-up comedian, based on the First Amendment. My job, my life doesn't exist without this country.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else in the world. And I have done, I told her this. I said, I've done 10 specials on my 11th. If I get it filmed, great. But if I only have 10, I did enough. And whatever target this puts on, man, sometimes you just do the fucking right thing. So I appreciate it, man. Go ahead. Show me this machine thing. Cause this is where I explained it to her today. And she was like, wait, what?
All right. We'll blow through this one pretty quick because you're already familiar with the concepts.
Yep.
But I'll show you. So this is Clark County, Nevada. Two biggest counties in the state are Clark County and Washoe. Mm-hmm. And so, as I said, if you're going to win a state, you're going to have to bring down the votes or bring up your votes in the biggest counties.
Right.
And these are the biggest counties. It's like 80% of the votes, I think, is in these two counties. It's ridiculous. They have Las Vegas in Clark County, Nevada.
Right.
There you go. And it's very liberal in these areas as well. So we're going to highlight here. is I'm going to show you what you've already generally seen. You know a distribution. You know what normal looks like.
Right.
Mail-in looks normal for them, but there's only a few points. But here's that point: is a straight line. We don't see any rapid change.
Right.
Yeah.
As more people turn up to vote, it's a straight line for both. There you go. Washoe County looks the same. Here's Clark County election day. Here's where we talk about, can you see, machines? They don't vote by precinct here. Here's the difference. They vote by location, early voting, or whatever. So for early voting, there's voting locations throughout the county, throughout the state, and you go wherever you want. And it just gets added up there, and there you go. And so in this case, these are voting machines, and we're looking at, is there any change as more people turn up to vote?
50%.
And so,
50%.
yeah, so when we originally did this, we assumed, hey, mail-in looks good. Hey, election day doesn't really look weird, right? We see a more normal shape that it's like that.
No, it look absolutely
that more normal. And then we're like, what is this 50% dip here? Why are we seeing it? It's for both candidates at the top. Harris is pulled out just to show it. But we saw there's a weird dip at 50%. But we don't really see a lot of change after that. And we did do this in a scatter plot. But we're like, oh, so maybe this is normal. And we'll kind of highlight this further. So we looked at early voting, though. And you've not seen this concept yet, if you're familiar, but this is a distribution concept. This is your Russian tail just shown without the lines. This is the bar graphs. So remember, Russian tail is just, how does things shift at higher turnout or higher percent?
Right.
And so what we're seeing here is, instead of it being a bell curve, I'll go back and I'll show you this. So this is what it should more look like.
Right.
If the caveat is, if the votes are centered around 50%, it should be more of a normal distribution. And because we have a two-party system, they generally are averaging, depending on what they're doing, if they're closer to 40 to 60%, we're getting a normal distribution. Right. And so in this case, there's no normal distribution here. And this is what tipped us off. And we dug down deeper. But here's the way you read this. The x-axis, bottom axis, is the percentage of the votes. So Harris is the top. She got 0% of the votes in all of these precincts. This bar graph is frequency is the amount of voting machines in this case. So we're seeing at 40%, she's getting just a little bit less than 150 machines worth of votes. And so the reason why we bring this up, you should expect to see, if you can, say a normal distribution, we should see that mountain or that bell curve.
Right.
But instead, what we're seeing is that it places where more votes were cast, as we'll break it down, Trump begins to grow in the amount of votes he's getting. And that's just an indication of this, and we'll highlight exactly
around
what.
50%.
Yeah, after 50% for Harris, she drops down suddenly, and Trump jumps up.
And again, guys, we're getting to, I get it's getting dense. It's so dense right now, even I'm hurting. But what he's saying is that there is no reason for, like, once we hit 50, there should be no change. It should just be a normal, everybody votes, everybody's over. Instead of everybody votes for Harris, and then all of a sudden they fucking stop voting for Harris and they start voting for Trump. That's not how this works.
That's what this is
showing. It's not how any voting works in our history. This is fucking insane.
And this is 24. So early voting,
This is
24,
24. Wow.
Clark County, Nevada. And this is one county.
And the potential way to do this would kick the machines in. The machines would have to be programmed with an algorithm that would kick in at 50% and start changing votes or swapping
Potentially.
votes. Now, I'm not saying it happened. I'm saying the only way, allegedly, possibly, right, exactly.
Yes.
A guy said maybe.
Okay.
And so here's the concern. Someone said, hey, maybe this is just how it is, right? Well,
no.
So hold up. Early voting, right? Yeah. Everyone's going to vote.
So
I'm
already amped up, man.
Yeah, you're ready.
I'm gonna go.
It's a little warm in here. All right. We said, hey, if this is some indication of maybe just, quirks of this area, right? What if this isn't manipulation? What would cause this? Well, if this were to be caused by, like, normal human voting behavior, it'd be really weird, but maybe, right? Well, we said, well, let's look at the nonpartisan races cast at the same locations on the same tickets by the same people. And there's your normal distribution. This is early voting for Clark County. There's state Supreme Court C and F chairs.
It's exactly what we should see.
This is what you should see. And you see it, both candidates, in this case, they're nonpartisan. That's the point. These are nonpartisan. This isn't an R versus a D.
Right.
This is just the judge. Judges are generally more nonpartisan, like Wisconsin
Judge,
was.
DA, whatever. Right.
And so we see it here. We see it for the ballot questions too, more normal distribution. So why are we only seeing the partisan races on these tickets? The president, the senator, why are we seeing those with this weird shape? And that's where, this was the foundation of our analysis. Pennsylvania is the culmination of everything we've worked on. This was the foundation. And we said, hey, we've seen this before. So Good had said, hey, I've seen this before. This is a Russian tale where you're shifting votes. And turnout is a big thing. And Roman UDOT was the one who published this. We've already highlighted that time and time again. You've already seen this like 60 times now to get to this point.
It's just so obvious. It's so obvious.
What's so frustrating is when you see them side by side.
Holy shit.
It's that much worse. It's the same concern visualized here. And then you said, hey, what could cause this, right? So we did break that down, and we're going to show you that potential vote change occurring. I think I may have a few more other slides thrown in here. Oh, here's the 24 Georgia election. So on the left here was 2022 or 2020. This is left is 2020, the Russian referendum. Do you know why this is an important election?
The Russian referendum. Why?
Yeah, the referendum to change their constitution to allow President Putin to serve additional terms. Yes, that was why that was an important election.
Wow, the Russians really love him.
Yeah, and then the Russian tail.
They love him at 60%. That's
only where more people are voting. And what's ironic is we see this in Georgia for 24 as well. Remember the big blow up with the Georgian Dream Party and concerns of Russian collusion, perhaps, with their party. We see the same Russian tail for them. Roman UDOT as well as work.
And one more thing, I want to point some. Do you remember Georgia was where Trump called in and said, "I need 1,170 votes" because he knew.
Well, this is the country of Georgia.
This is Georgia.
This is Georgia, the country.
So he possibly,
If you've applied this the same way,
I want to go back to 20. Now, can we show 2020?
Yep. We're going to show 2020.
Because 2020 is different. But there's still a problem.
Yeah. Well, so you asked me this. You said, "Hey, how can we truly know if there's an algorithm and what would be a side effect?" Right.
Right.
And so have you seen this?
Holy shit.
Here's your binning.
This is one of the ones that bugged me when I first
And so let me explain how you read this. So what this shows is at the bottom is the amount of votes cast on those voting machines because they vote by
and that's
location.
100 votes, 110.
So it's 550. So
everything changes at 500 votes.
No, try again. 250. So the blue is Harris,
right?
The red is Trump. We see from 0 to 50, it's a little random. Here's the thing. People argue, hey, we should see some variance. Yes, we see it from every place below 50 votes because there's not enough votes across all these precincts.
Yeah, but you should see variance, all of these locations. She should win some counties.
Here's the point. Sub 50, it's a little chaotic. Above 50, 50 to 200, it's consistent. We established consistency. This is over 900 voting machines. That's the point, is these bins are showing every voting location, the equivalent to every precinct. Everyone. And so we see it average out to Harris getting 50, 55 on average. I think it's closer to 52% of the.
So where do the votes change?
At 200. Look at 200.
Yep.
After 200,
she loses every single.
She begins to drop and lose every. I believe this is on average every place.
This is 2020. No, it's 2024.
Every voting location, every voting machine that is exceeding that amount of votes cast.
That's impossible. There's no way she could.
This is averaged out. And the concern here is, remember what I said? Once you hit 60%, you want to average 60, and then you want to stay at 60. Because if you were,
is that what this does?
That is what this is doing. So if this was caused by a vote changing algorithm or whatever's going on, potentially. What you're seeing is after 250 votes per machine, every machine after that point begins to rapidly shift in the amount of votes for one candidate and push them to 60% on average, and then keep them at 60%. And the thing is, we are concerned that there was a higher turnout. So you actually had, in order to keep it at 60%, you were changing votes and then you were deleting extra votes. And that would be seen by looking at like drop off. Right. At a lower race. But the problem is all the partisan races show the same concerns.
But the other ones don't.
The nonpartisans don't.
Okay. Do me a favor. This happened in 2022. I want to run it, right? This
is 24?
Wait. This is 24. But this happened in 2020, but it was less. Right?
Yes. And we're going to show you that. Here's 2020. Remember we talked about election day being normal, except
another type of graph.
Another graph here.
You're so excited.
So
that's a new graph.
So election day, we didn't see anything weird except for the 50% dip, right?
Right.
And you can't really see it here, but it almost looks normal. On the top is the same for 2020, but notice just at the end,
Yep. The
80 onwards. And here's a caveat. People ask me this. They said, why would you only do one type of voting? No. It's not voting type anymore, right? We already talked about how these machines are used, for multiple types. And we saw it in Mailin in Philadelphia, right? What matters is the threshold. What is the threshold on this? How many votes, x-axis, 2020, how many votes are actually being cast? If you read that, it's 0 to, what's the max amount of votes cast?
Well, I can't see the 100.
It's 100.
100, right.
So that's the thing is,
started switching them out.
The amount of votes cast on election day for 2020 and 24 was really low per machine. They had a lot of machines. They were voting, spreading out.
Okay, this is Nevada. So they had
their voting locations. So they were spreading them out.
This looks pretty normal, is what you're saying.
This looks very, very normal. And we asked the question, well, why is this normal? Except for just at the end where we start to see a little bit of weirdness.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we're like, what's going on? They're not meeting the threshold.
The machines aren't hitting enough votes to click the algorithm.
They're not meeting the threshold.
So at 100 votes, it won't do it.
They're sub 100.
Sub 100. And because in 2020, don't you have other machines that are 500? It started switching them and it didn't switch enough. So that's why in 2024, they went to 250.
You'll see that.
Oh, sorry. Potentially.
Clark County is a little different. We're going to show you Washoe County, which is the other big one. And so when we first did this, we were like,
to my people, I'm sorry this is so dense, but it was so important. Again, this is like the end of the country. If it's potentially the end of the country.
So here's the thing, right? Is if they're not meeting the threshold, what is this? This is Washoe County 2020. They had over 100 votes per machine, per location. And look at the top first, 2020, bottom is 24. 24 looks more normal, right? But 2020, look at 100.
Yeah.
Look at 100 and look at onward. So here was the concern here is we said, hey, if this was caused by a vote changing algorithm and the tabulators or whatever's going on is changing votes.
You need to explain this to me. I'm not clear on what's
all
going
right.
on. Okay. So at 100 votes, that's up there, right?
Let's start with the axis again, because I always forget this.
All right.
So top graph, 2020 Washoe County, election day, second largest county in Nevada.
Got it.
The bottom axis is the amount of votes cast per, in this case, it's technically like tabulator, but they do something weird where like the voting machines to the tabulator they kind of are the same, but not really. It's just being transferred. So they transferred the votes. The tabulators are adding them up. And what the tabulator looks like could have been doing is any places where you get over 100 votes cast, in this case, in 2020, you begin to change those votes for Trump. And that's what we're seeing here is it becomes clear because it separates at 100 votes.
Yeah. And
you see it in 2020 in Washoe County for election day. You don't see it as much for 24. It's very hard to see it, but you see it just at the end. And our concern here is we were like, hey, if there's a threshold, how do they determine what the threshold is?
Right.
So I don't think if there was a threshold, I don't think it's a static threshold. I think it may be best. It may be best. It could be based off of amount of. It could be based off of many things. It could scale by county to county, by whatever, by the amount of votes cast, and say, hey, I want to change a certain amount.
Here's the problem with that. If you're going to do that, the intensity of time.
Yes.
That it would take. It'd be much easier to write one program, send it to the machine, run the algorithm, and have it change at that vote. So I think maybe, but also you couldn't do it to every machine because there's no point in doing it. You also know certain states are going to go to Dem no matter what, and certain states are going to go to Republican no matter what.
But that would matter. What counties lean which direction, and like say if someone had a team of really high level
tech kids,
maybe in their 20s, that could even go in and harvest Social Security Administration data, or
later, not for to show that in the industry, but like if they would go into like all the government agencies, take all everybody's data, and then maybe
like a team like that,
who would do that?
And there's a concern of having some of those. You would have to have some of those individuals, and one of them may or may not have written a program to be used by tabulators to read digital ballots and verify votes that way, which may or may not exist online. And you can go look that up.
Possibly do that?
Perhaps that is a thing, potentially a thing.
Possibly.
And the reason why that's a concern is it's not that software could have been used. It's that if you've made a software that works with machines, you know how the machines work anyways. So for you to have made a software for tabulator systems to read votes,
So are you saying
you already know how the tabulators
it's
work.
potentially possible that there might be a group of guys that were working for a high-tech guy that possibly have written, this is a hypothetical.
It would need to almost happen. Yeah,
But
that would
like,
be
so
the
they would
requirement.
actually in the past have written some programs that would actually run tabulators for machines like this.
run on tabulators for being able to identify votes and like
Do you know
read.
what else is weird is how we said that they project? And it was interesting because it happened several times. But for example, in mid-October of 24, Elon was at a town hall in Pennsylvania. And he repeated false conspiracy theories where he claimed that voting machines rig elections. He said, I'm a technologist. I know a lot about computers. And I'm like, the last thing I would ever do is trust a computer program because it's just too easy to hack. He said that October 2024.
Who's
in
this? Who's
Pennsylvania.
this Elon Musk guy we talking about? What does he do?
He's possibly running our government right now.
All right, so we've got this. We get this.
Yeah.
You have now laid out so much information, and we've tried to clear it up. My head hurts, but I want to say, what would be your theory? I understand why you'd want to do this because then you could run the country forever.
Well, I think the last point I'll make when it comes to 2020, we're going to file a report and get a report and everything ready for 2020 and all of the data we have, because this is just the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah, you guys,
we have a lot of
just that you've done this.
data.
I sense there's a lot
more that
work
we
to do.
There's a lot more that we haven't wanted to publish yet because we want to verify, right? We want to make sure
Right.
it's right, reproduce it, everything.
Because you're not the cyber ninjas. You want to put some crazy shit out that has no basis in fact.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to have you on, all you guys. I wanted you because none of us got it. Wow. How? This is how.
Here's the concern. If there was a compromise in 2020 and 24, why? So in this case, right?
It
we're looking at
wasn't
the graph.
enough in 2020.
Right. We're looking at the graph. We're saying, hey, in this case, this potential manipulation looks like it benefits a certain candidate. If there was manipulation in 2020, why was it not sufficient to change the outcome of the election?
Because more people voted in that election than almost any election.
Mm-hmm.
And
think of this.
And they didn't put enough stank on it.
No.
Is that the technical term?
Well, for one, look, I like it. No, the threshold is potentially lower in 2020, meaning you're changing votes sooner. So if the threshold was more aggressive in 2020, why didn't you win? Let me ask you this: how did people vote in 2020?
Oh, COVID by mail. Predominantly.
Holy shit! We voted by mail, so that means you couldn't fix the tax.
There weren't as many votes available
And do you remember?
fix.
So again,
Every mailing graph I showed you, except for like one county.
Yep. And also, how much did a certain candidate complain
There's
about
a quote.
mail-in voting? He tried to end it.
There's a quote.
He fucked up the post office.
Yes. All right. Listen. There's a
Potentially.
quote. Potentially. All right. Here's the concern. There is a quote, and I generally quote: "Mail-in ballots are fraudulent and are being used by the Democrats to rig the elections." This was prior to the 2020 election night. Go look up who said this,
Yeah, I remember.
and you're going to find concerns. And here's the difference in what we're doing today and what we're talking about today and everything that has come before this. I've spent 4 months now fighting the stigma, the taboo of election integrity. This isn't election denial. We have the data, and all we want to validate that our elections are safe, secure. And here's the thing. There's two types of election claims. There's election fraud, and then there's voter fraud. And we're talking about election fraud. We're talking about a systemic issue.
Yeah, this isn't voter fraud. People went and did their job. Americans went and did their job and voted. Republican or Democrat, they went and did their job.
Yeah.
Now,
I'll just keep giving you examples of this, but you know how Trump again always projects. And there are 2 clips on C-SPAN that you can go and watch where he says, have you guys seen these? Where he says, and then we rigged the election. And so now I'm president. Have you seen this when he's talking about There's one in the Oval Office
I've
and
seen
one at a
these.
rally.
I will say caveat to this is a lot of the talking points when it comes to elections, there's always a pointed statement about 2020. So we avoid some of the direct quotes just because we don't need to muddy the waters. The data doesn't lie. We're showing you the data.
So that's what
Trump,
I wanted.
yeah,
that's
but
what I
we're
wanted.
the
What I wanted to
salacious-
finish was Americans did their job, voted for who they wanted. The fucked up part is because you couldn't rig. If you rigged it any other way, there's too many witnesses. The only way to potentially rig this is to rig those machines, and you'd have to be someone very, very into high tech. You'd have to be
That's
someone
what I
who
was
really
gonna
understood.
tell you.
You'd have to have a crew of
Yes.
people that could actually write a program that would do that.
Yahoo and Snopes did a fact check of this claim, and it was found to be correct. Trump, talking about Elon, said Elon knows those computers, talking about voting machines, better than anybody. All those computers, those vote counting computers. And we ended up winning Pennsylvania like in a landslide.
Okay, I think we can stop there.
He said it about Elon
I gotta
in
very much.
Pennsylvania.
To all of you guys, I just want to say, Eddie T, thank you guys so much for letting us do this. I watched you did another show and I watched it and I didn't think the guy I wanted to give you all the time you wanted to lay this out.
I think we've covered more than enough.
I think so, but also if you can't, and again, I try to de-geek it because it took me so long to get it. If this data is too specific, it is too, and the shapes, like, by the way, me and Ray got, shapes. Oh, the shapes are weird. See, when you gave us shapes, that's it. And if we can get the dumb people to see the shapes, I think we have something here.
Well,
I think we're on to something.
and as you said, the answer is simple. The ETA, our purpose now, right, is we've been putting this out there. We're going to keep putting it out, but
there needs to be literally with this data. This needs to be sent to some of the Democrats in Congress. They need to look at it. There needs to be a hearing on this because
there needs to be audits.
There needs to be audits but there needs to be a hearing on, like, you should be there explaining this to them because this is impossible. This couldn't happen. There's no way that all of a sudden Trump voters showed up after 50% of the vote
And
was
not
cast.
just in one county or one state
All
or
the precincts.
all of them.
Right.
All the counties
Yeah.
that we've looked at.
And
in these
all
places.
swing states, right?
So you guys make sure that you
There's a
go
concern,
to electiontruthalliance.org. You can go and learn more about them, what they do. You can volunteer. You can contact them. You can donate. You can go and look at these studies, his data, as all of you are confirming and verifying things and then making them available to you.
Thank you so much for being on.
Thank
man.
you so
I
much.
appreciate it. Guys, everybody, we're going to cut you loose. Thank you so much for being on, everybody from ETA being here and making sure that this was laid out. I'm in despair,
I know.
honestly. I'm in despair. So I'm glad we got you fighting it, man. Keep fighting it. Thank you, man.